Well, the board of the SABC has suspended the retrenchment process for a period of 7 days. The board released a statement late last night saying that this would allow all stakeholders to engage and explore further options in an effort to ensure the financial sustainability of the SABC. The temporary suspension of the Section 189 process follows several days of anxiety and drama at the SABC, with staff across the country protesting against the planned retrenchment of 400 workers. Now, the board's decision follows an emergency meeting that went on into the early hours of this morning. The meeting followed a repeat proposal by the Communications Minister to halt the retrenchments. Well, on the line now, we have the president of Bemawu, Buisson, to speak to us about these latest developments. Hannes, good morning. So what does the temporary suspension of the Section 189 process actually mean, and how does it affect the retrenchment process overall?
Good morning. Sakina, yeah, it does not actually mean anything. The notices has been issued. The termination date is the 31st of December, and suspending it for 7 days means absolutely nothing. We are of the view that that is simply to derail the action that is currently in the pipeline, that is busy developing. That is our urgent application in the Labour Court that will be heard next Friday, and then the strike action that will commence as from today going forward. So if the SABC board is serious about this process, then they must withdraw those termination letters, and we should start from scratch and then deal with the issues.
So what are you expecting to happen over the next 7 days in these talks between the various stakeholders?
We want the SABC to fix the problems that has given rise to the Section 189. Now, if one have regard to the retrenchment notice, it is ineffective commercial product packaging, old uncompetitive pricing models, inadequate technology structures, and so on. So the SABC must first fix those problems and then sit around the table and consult in a proper way, not in a Section 189 process, but engage all staff in a process where we look at the organization, its structures, and the rationale. That cannot happen in 7 days. It's not possible. So the whole Section 189 process must be stopped, and that process must be followed.
And of course, what does this mean for staff members who've already received those redundancy letters, Hannes? Where does this leave them?
Well, as I said, the clock is ticking. Suspending it for 7 days does not suspend the termination letters, and staff are still being under threat, severely under threat. In our view, if the SABC wants labour peace and they want to follow proper procedures prescribed in the Labour Relations Act, they must stop the Section 189 process.
And what about the court proceedings? At least you claimed that you were going to take the SABC to court. Have you done so, and on what basis?
We are filed an urgent interdict that will be heard next Friday. We are not going to withdraw that urgent interdict unless the SABC is going to withdraw the Section 189 letters, the termination letters, because that is ultimately what we are then going to ask the court. So if that is not going to happen, the process in court will continue next Friday.
Hannes, what does this mean for independent contractors? Because when the SABC put out the initial statement, it was 600 permanent staff that were going to be retrenched, and then you had 1,000 independent contractors who would also be affected by this jobs bloodbath. What does this mean for independent contractors? Because nothing has been said about them in this process to date.
Halfway through the process that the SABC has followed, the BOTS consultation process, the SABC then told us that the independent contractors, they are not going to terminate any independent contractors. They in fact first said that independent contractors are not part of this process, although it's on its notice. So what the SABC actually is busy doing, if one look at the structures, is that they are dismissing permanent employees, and they are replacing them with independent contractors who has no benefits, no leave, no sick leave, no pension fund, no medical aid. And that is an unfair labour practice, and a practice that we've been complaining for a very long time. We've asked the SABC many times to convert, in fact, its independent contractors to permanent employees. So what the SABC has now cleverly done or attempted to do is to simply not cut heads, but to simply move its personnel cost to a freelance cost, to then say that we have reduced our personnel cost. That cost is actually just sitting somewhere else.
So we've spoken over the past few days quite a lot about the executive and their salaries, but what about this management structure, which also doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense? Because what is the end game here, Hannes? What are you hoping? Or what do you envisage should happen at the SABC? Because in the end, the organization has to be sustainable. But how best are you hoping we achieve that goal?
So that is one of the problems that we had with the SABC's presentation. For instance, in commercial enterprises, the SABC added on that level that they said was bloated, they added general managers, I think 3 or 4. When we asked them about their previous statement, they said, well, that's the business requirements and this is what we're going to do. We want to see a sustainable SABC. We want to see an SABC with a clear strategy. We want to see the SABC to succeed, and we want to see the SABC succeeding with its loyal employees who's been serving them for many, many years, who's been built up to their retirement, who has planned for their future. So we want the SABC to sit with each and every staff meeting in divisional meetings, with us being also present to supervise that process, to ensure that things are being done fairly, to jointly design a structure to make the SABC work properly. We all want an SABC that is sustainable, that is workable, but we cannot put out 600 people in the streets. Some of the complaints that we have received from members, for instance, is to say, my position is on the system an administrator. The SABC has simply scrapped my position, not having regard that I am the only person in this SABC that must pay certain license fees, and I don't see in the structure where they have allocated my position. So this is not a well thought through process, and a lot of people are going to get hurt. They're going to be put out on the streets. They will suffer severe prejudice as a result of that by the time that the SABC is going to realize that they're making a mistake. For instance, the new structures cannot function in the way that the SABC has proposed. It will not work. We're not going to be able to serve the public in all of the languages that we are supposed to do in terms of legislation.
So what's the bottom line, Hannes, as my final question to you? Will anybody lose a job? Let's be honest now. What is it that people should envisage here? Will people be losing jobs? And if so, at what level? How many are we looking at? And without really giving people false hope out there.
Exactly. We don't want to give people false hope. We have not seen anything that has been presented by the SABC in terms of its structure that would justify the loss of a single job. In particular, if one look at the SABC outsourcing its business, it is still having that particular cost. We would want to do everything in our power to ensure that not a single employee lose his or her job. If that at the end of the day, after a proper, fair, transparent process, if that happens, that some employees are being redundant in the organization, then the SABC should part with those people in a respectful and in an economic viable manner for those employees who's been given their lives to the SABC, been carrying the SABC at times when there was no board, no management. Employees who kept on working at that point in time, keep on broadcasting, lower their heads and shoulder forward to assist the SABC. So if we can prevent that, and if that, at the end of the day, there is a rationale, we are not saying the SABC must be a organization, a charity organization that keeps people that's not doing any jobs. But we do not for one moment believe, Sakina, that there are 400 people in the SABC that is daily doing absolutely nothing, and they are getting paid. And by the way, just for the record, we saw an article that has been put out in respect of what SABC employees are earning. That is not correct. We have the SABC's salary scales, and that does not correspond with what has been published in respect of that. And we intend to publish those scales to then rectify the perception that has been created that employees are getting these fat salaries and that they are complaining with a bread under the arm.
And I've heard many employees complaining about that very article, saying it's devoid of any context. But Hannes de Buisson, we're going to have to leave it there for now. Thanks so much for speaking to us. And that's the president of Bemawu, Hannes de Buisson, on the latest with regard to the suspension of the Section 189 process here at the SABC.